He was born as the weakest in the world, but life decided to give him a second chance, a chance that no one would reject. Recap of solo leveling in a few minutes. We find ourselves in Korea several years ago, and for unknown reasons, portals begin to appear all over the world. Inside these portals, there are small worlds filled with monsters, just like the dungeons in the video game. At the same time, some people begin to experience something known as the awakening. The awakening makes normal people suddenly acquire powers, and depending on the power awakened in a person, they are listed into 7 ranks, from the letter E to the letter S, and then after S follows the National Hunter rank. But let's not get ahead of ourselves yet. Those who experience the awakening have a possibility of becoming hunters, who are the ones who enter the dungeon and eliminate all bosses, as this is the only way to close them. Now, keep in mind that closing the dungeon is crucial, because if it's not done, the monsters begin to come out and eradicate everything in their path. The dungeons are also ranked from C to the letter S. The higher the rank of this dungeon, the more powerful the monsters lurking inside are. The job of the hunter is extremely dangerous. However, thanks to the cores and minerals that can be obtained in these dungeons, those who dedicate themselves to this profession earn a lot of money. Well, I don't think it's also necessary to mention that the higher of the rank, the more expensive the items inside are. Now let's proceed with our story. Our protagonist is this boy named Sung Ji-woo. Now keep in mind that I will probably be saying this name wrong, so please do not judge me. Who awakened as the weakest hunter, that is rank E. In fact, even among those of his rank, he's a lot weaker. People of the letter E generally do not become hunters because they are too weak for the job and could end up with several injuries or even death. A clear example is Jin-woo, who ends up with serious injuries no matter how low the level of the enemies in every mission are. Sometimes he's gotten close to even dying. Fortunately, there are healers. As I didn't mention this, but there are different types of hunters, just like in video games. We got tanks, assassins, healers, and other different types of hunters that I'll be mentioning throughout the story. Thanks to the healer, our protagonist hasn't died yet, but not all injuries can be healed, so every time he enters a dungeon, he crosses the line between life and death. So why does he do it? It turns out that his mother has a serious illness that until now is impossible to cure. The hospital bills are expensive, and to prevent his sister from dropping out of school, he risks his life. However, nobody knows this because for some reason he's embarrassed to tell it, and instead he says that he's just doing it for fun. Most hunters make fun of him and they call him the weakest hunter in the world and consider him just a burden, especially the healer since he gives them a lot of work. I personally feel that if your mother is the reason you're doing this, risking your life, you should not be ashamed of that. As any other day, he heads out to a dungeon. The raid of that day is led by Song, a rank D hunter who is very powerful among those of his rank. Other participants include Mr. Kim, another rank D hunter who seems to get along with our protagonist but actually talks badly about him behind his back. Also in the raid, we have someone named Yi, a rank B healer who, despite her higher rank, suffers from fear and therefore prefers to work only in low rank dungeons. She shows concern for our protagonist and gets along with him very well throughout the dungeon. As usual, our protagonist is injured time and time again, and thanks to our healer, he continues to move forward. The dungeon had almost been complete, but our protagonist had only managed to get a rank E core, which is very little money. They just needed to defeat the boss, but they couldn't find it anywhere. After exploring the dungeon, they came across a giant door, which was a double dungeon, which is when there's a dungeon inside another dungeon. These can be very dangerous, and usually hunters should notify their guild and wait for reinforcement to explore it. However, since these guys didn't want to share the treasure, they held a vote. Should they enter the dungeon or wait for reinforcements? 8 voted for no, including G, and 8 voted for yes. The final word was with our protagonist. As he hadn't gathered enough money, he decided to risk a little more.
I don't want money. I need it. Mom's treatments aren't free. And then there's my sister's college tuition. I vote yes.
G gets extremely angry with him and jowls. Our protagonist asked her, but in the end, she gives up. and tells him that as a compensation he must invite her to dinner. Altogether, they opened the door and entered, but it was very strange. In the room there was not a single monster, and the only thing was a bunch of harmless statues. No one knew what was happening, and while exploring they found a stone with 3 commandments written on it. The first one was to worship the Lord, the second one was to praise the Lord, and the third one was to test your faith in the Lord. The text ended with a very clear message: those who not follow the commands will die immediately. The doors closed and some hunters tried to escape, but they were massacred instantly. These statues began to move and killed indiscriminately. Jing-Woo understood what was happening and told everyone to crouch down. Get down now! Some didn't react on time, and others, like Mr. Song, lost some of their limbs. Those who stood up were killed, and Jing-Woo understood the first commandment, which was worship the Lord. Our protagonist understood that this was the first commandment, which was worship the Lord. They had to kneel before him, and no one could raise above a certain height, or there will be consequences. He immediately shared his theory with everyone. At first, they didn't believe him, but when the boss saw their anxious eyes for life, he decided to trust them. Everyone kneeled down, and once they did, the face of the statue changed dramatically. The attack stopped and they were finally able to stand up. Now they had to follow the second commandment: praise the Lord. One of the hunters volunteered since he used to work at a church, but his praise were directed towards the wrong God. Desperate, everyone began to flee, but when they got close to the statues, our protagonist thought and understood how the statues actually work. He realized that there were statues with instruments, and surely these were a safe place. He immediately told everyone to get into safety and that each one had to activate a statue, because he thought the praising the Lord meant putting all the musical statues to play. Jing-Woo, our protagonist, ended up at a statue with Yi, but only one person could be under a statue or it wouldn't activate. As a true gentleman, he leaves the girl in the safe place and risks his life to save everyone. However, on the way he confuses a statue and heads to the one with a shield, thinking that it wouldn't attack. Unfortunately, his decision led him to lose one of his legs. But the important thing is that he managed to read the statue that needed to be activated. Once they completed the second commandment, an altar appeared and things calmed down a bit. Ji rushed out to help the protagonist, but there was nothing she could do. The third commandment was test your faith, and when they saw the altar, everyone understood what it was about: a sacrifice. Mr. Kim wasted no time in blaming the raid leader for all the death caused by his decision and said that he should sacrifice himself. Jing-Woo interrupted, saying that it wasn't true, that it wasn't Mr. Song's fault, but Mr. Song stopped him and admitted his mistake and volunteered to go to the altar. However, the only thing that happened was that a red flame ignited. He understood that it wasn't a sacrifice, but it was actually a test, and for it to begin, everyone had to be on the altar. And so it happened. For each person, a red flame ignited, and when everyone was inside, blue flames appeared. The blue flames extinguished one by one after a certain time. The dungeon's door opened and the statues began to approach slowly. Everyone panicked and didn't understand what was happening. Everyone except our protagonist, who knew that it was just a typical children's game. If they looked at the statues, they wouldn't be able to move, and what they needed to do was hold on until all the blue flames went out. On the other hand, the open door was a trap, a false hope for those lacking faith to flee. And even so, our protagonist telling them about this, the hunters started to leave. The hunters abandoned one by one. Everyone was left dumbfounded when they saw that all those who were fleeing came out unharmed. The hunters were increasingly tempted to escape, including Mr. Kim, who said that he had to survive for his family and fled. Jing-Woo got upset and started cursing at them. Because of them, they wouldn't be able to escape and most likely will end up dying. Mr. Song told them that it was all his fault and that Jing-Woo and Ji had to escape. He said that he was in the altar so the door wouldn't close. Of course, Ji didn't expect to have exhausted all her mana so much earlier. She fell down to the ground and couldn't move. For that reason, our protagonist asked Mr. Song to escape. to take Ji and get out of there while he stayed as a sacrifice. Mr. Song didn't want to allow it, but there was no other way to save Miss Yi, so Mr. Song said goodbye while Ji only cried. Jingwoo smiled at her and gave her the only core he'd found, then pointed her towards the exit they agreed on. But inside, Jingwoo felt death creeping closer. He thought that if at least he died, maybe the other ones will survive. Yet, as the pain set in, he realized a truth he'd been hiding from himself. He didn't want to die. Then, just as life was slipping away, a message appeared in front of him like something out of a video game. You have completed the secret quest, the courage of the weak. Do you want to accept? If you don't, you will die. He accepted without hesitation. When he opened his eyes, he was in the hospital. And luckily for him, he was completely healed. Even his leg was reattached. He'd been in coma for 3 days, and when he woke up, there was hunters from the Hunter Association waiting. They needed to make sure he hadn't experienced a double awakening. In rare cases, some people awaken twice, gaining enough power to jump 2 ranks, like going from rank C to rank A. They tested him with a crystal that measured his strength. Jingwoo held his breath, but the result was the same as always, weaker than even rank E. After they cleared him, Jingwoo asked about the others who had been trapped in the double dungeon with him. Thankfully, they told him everyone had survived. Mr. Song was the only one seriously injured, losing an arm. Oddly, the support team found no signs of the statue that had attacked him, just Jingwoo, unconscious and unharmed. After the hunters left, Jingwoo noticed something strange. None of them saw the giant message floating in front of his face. Curious, he wondered if he was the only one who could see it. His sister visited shortly after, and she didn't notice it either, which confirmed his suspicion. Of course, she was too busy schooling him for getting hurt all the time, threatening to quit school and get a job if he ended up in the hospital again. Jingwoo only interrupted her with an odd question. How do you open a message in a video game? She looked at him like he was crazy but answered anyway. Then the message popped up. Complete 100 push-ups, 100 squats, 100 sit-ups, and run 10 kilometers in under 24 hours or face punishment.
Yeah, okay. Hospital patients don't exactly have the energy to spare.
But when he woke up, the timer on his daily quest had run out. As a result, he was teleported to a vast desert where he was forced to survive for 4 hours while being chased by a giant worm. 4 terrifying hours later, Jingwoo was back in the hospital bed, looking worse than before. The nurse was baffled, unable to understand how the protagonist ended up in that condition. From then on, our protagonist never skipped the daily quest. The system made him exercise every day, but he noticed he was getting rewards each time he finished. Oh, and here's the fun part. Our protagonist basically had a video game interface. He had inventory, a store, skills, stats, a health bar, and even an MP bar. Jingwoo didn't fully understand how it all worked, but every time he finished a daily quest, he earned 3 points to boost his stats. Occasionally, he got other rewards, like an instant dungeon key. He focused his points on building his strength, and to this surprise, his muscles started growing quickly. Feeling curious and a bit more confident, Jingwoo asked to be discharged from the hospital, and once out, he made his way to the location where he could use the special key. And using the key, he opened a portal invisible to everyone. Only our protagonist could see and enter it. Inside, he was transported to a dungeon filled with wolves, not the strongest monsters, but definitely enough to be a serious threat for him. Regret hit him hard, but there was no escape this time. Unlike regular dungeons, he was stuck there, so he had to give his best shot. As he took on the wolves, something surprised happened. His body felt incredibly light. He was dodging attacks left and right almost effortlessly, and even countering a few strikes. And actually, he felt very strong and maybe even confident. But he knew his bare hands wouldn't cut it. That's when he remembered that Mr. Kim had left his sword back in the double dungeon before running out. Checking his inventory, he was relieved to find it safe there. With the sword in his hand, the wolves became easier to handle. He took down a few more and noticed something odd. These monsters weren't dropping the usual cores, but they were dropping items he could sell in the store for gold. Gold, however, was a currency only usable in store, and he wasn't high enough level to buy just yet. As he moved forward, he was suddenly surrounded by a whole pack of wolves. He fought them off one by one, but there seemed to be no end to this. For a moment, he doubted if he could make it, but then he thought about everyone who laughed at him and those who left him for dead. He was tired of being weak, and he needed strength strength to make sure that no one could betray him again. With this in mind, he fought harder and defeated every single wolf in there and gained enough experience to level him up several times.
Fight as hard as we can, till the very end! Ah! Ah! If it needs, I'll get stronger!
One of the wolves dropped a peculiar item, a crystal that could teleport him out of the dungeon whenever he wanted. But instead of taking the easy way out, he decided to stay and face the boss. The boss was a massive serpent, and on his first strike, he already worn out the sword and shattered against the serpent's scale. Cornered and nearly defenseless, he tried to keep attacking, but the scales were too tough. Things looked bleak until he noticed a weakness. The serpent's back wasn't covered at all. With quick thinking, he tricked the serpent and managed to land a significant hit from behind. Taking advantage, he wrestled it into submission and struggled with it with his bare hands. And with that, he emerged victorious. For defeating the boss, he earned 2 rewards. The first was a dagger crafted from the serpent's teeth. Not only was it sharp, but it also inflicted a powerful curse. Anyone struck by it would lose 1% of their life every second, and this was a powerful tool for his journey ahead. Now, our second reward was a vial of potion, but it came with a cost. Obviously, nothing is free. If drank, he will gain some serious damage resistance, but at a cost. It will sap him out of his strength. After he collected his reward, the dungeon faded away, leaving him back in the subway station. Suddenly, a soldier came rushing over, scolding him and asking how he even got in there. He quickly warned Jingwu to leave immediately because a dungeon boss had broken loose and was tearing up the area. But then the soldier realized Jingwu was a hunter and apologized, taking him straight to the battle scene. There, Jingwu saw a group of lower ranked hunters struggling against a boss. Their attacks lacked a lot of power and coordination, and it was clear that they couldn't handle the monster. Among them was Yi, looking completely shaken from fear. Jingwu quickly formed a plan and distracted the monster with his broken sword, then landed a final blow. But what he didn't expect was that the monster was so weak, his first strike was enough to take it down. The other hunters didn't even realize what happened. They thought they somehow defeated the boss together, and the only one who had any suspicions was the team's tank and strongest member. He couldn't believe their weak attacks had worked so suddenly. Scanning the area, he spotted Jingwu's sword in the ground. Curious, he asked the soldier who the weapon belonged to. But when he turned to look around for the answer, our protagonist already slipped away, leaving the tank seriously impressed. Oh, and it looks like Ji noticed him too. The next day, a nurse came to let Jingwu know that he was finally being discharged. But when she saw him working out, she was left speechless. Had he really been this strong when he came in? She congratulated him on his release and asked him for his number, although our innocent Jingwu thought it was to send him his medical results. Yeah, he's not alone. All men are innocent. Back home, he found his sister heading out to school. She stopped in her tracks, amazed of how much more toned and taller he looked. She asked stunned. Jingwu ignored her question and sent her off, but her comment made him realize that she was right. He had grown taller and more muscular in no time. This kind of transformation didn't just happen overnight, unless it was due to his stats. He figured it was time to focus on balance and not just strength. Now that he was so much stronger, he could finally make some real money. But to do that, he needed to register for a new rank at the guild. If anyone finds out there was a hunter who could level up, well, things will get very interesting. Realizing he's putting himself in serious danger if people discovered their unique ability to level up, Jingwu decided to play it safe. He resolved to keep improving his skills in secret, leveling up until he was powerful enough to protect himself from any threats. Now, a little backstory. To enter a dungeon, hunters usually need a team of at least 10. The stronger the dungeon, the more members and the higher the required rank is needed. However, some elite groups can bypass this by hiring weaker hunters as filler members. These fillers just make up the numbers and are paid a fixed amount and get a tiny slice of the dungeon's profit. Jingwu managed to snag one of these filler gigs with a team of 8 confident rank C hunters who didn't even bring a healer. They thought they were so skilled they wouldn't need one. And besides Jingwu, there was another one also acting as a filler. His name was Jingho, a healthy rank D kid decked out in pricey armor. That was very unusual, since most low-level rank hunters can't really afford any good gear. The money they make wasn't really enough, and the high cost of quality equipment means that you should just make it without one.
A D rank with that gear? Is this kid a trust fund baby?
The A-rank Sea Hunters couldn't resist making fun of Jingwoo and Jinho for being the weaklings of the group, our protagonist unfazed as if they needed him to do anything, and they replied, "Just carry our bags." When he questioned why they hadn't brought a healer, they brushed him off saying healers were only for the weak. Once inside the dungeon, they were met with total darkness. After switching on a light, they realized something odd. No monsters inside. Just then, our protagonist picked up some sounds in the distance and warned them that the monsters, specifically insect type ones, were nearby. Thanks to this alert, the team got into formation and managed to defeat a swarm of giant ants without any injuries. Jingwoo even took a few himself, keeping his kills unnoticed. Jingwoo was impressed by the team's coordination. Clearly they've been hunting together for a long time. The others, surprised by his quick reaction, asked how he known about the monsters. He shrugged, calling it a hunch. They warned him not to be too perceptive, clearly hinting that they had a plan involving Jinho. The dungeon turned out to be a massive labyrinth, stretching with very few monsters encountered. By hours of exploring, they couldn't locate the boss room. After a long search, they finally discovered the boss, which was a giant spider asleep. Even better, the whole area was full of mana crystal, which was equivalent to 10 million wons. 10 million wons is about $7,152. Or 145,000 Mexican pesos. The squad captain smirked and agreed, then asked his team if they brought mining tools. They all laughed and replied saying no, even though Jingwoo was clearly carrying a backpack full of them. The captain and his group told Jingwoo and Jinho to wait behind, saying that they'll head outside to get the necessary equipment and that Jingwoo and Jinho should keep watch over the monster. As they left, the team's mage secretly cast a spell to wake the spider up and trap those two inside. The squad's real plan was cruel. Let the spider devour Jingwoo and Jinho, then return to retrieve the crystals, steal Jinho's armor, and finally kill the spider to close the dungeon. Jingwoo, however, was already suspicious. It wasn't uncommon for hunters to pull stunts like this in dungeons, which was a zone with no cameras, no rules, or oversight to catch crimes. As soon as the spider woke up, it seemed pleased to find two appetizers waiting, but Jingwoo chuckled and drew his dagger and told him to stay calm. Although Jingwoo's sense of the spider was much stronger than anything he'd faced, he felt no fear. The fight began, and Jingwoo's strength surprised even him. Jinho was stunned. How could a rank D hunter be so powerful? And the only explanation he can think of is that Jinwoo might be a false ranker, which is someone capable of hiding their true rank. Now, false rankers are often highly dangerous individuals who suppress their powers, tricking rank meters into reading them as much weaker than they actually are. Jingwoo fought impressively, but his attacks didn't seem to faze the spider. Not even the dagger's special ability could activate against this powerful creature. But Jingwoo used a new skill that allowed him to move faster, leaving Jinho amazed. Yet it still wasn't enough to bring the spider down. Just as the spider was about to finish him off, Jingwoo remembered that he hadn't yet claimed his status recovery reward. I didn't mention this earlier, but one of the rewards for completing the daily quest is status recovery, a feature that instantly restores all health and fatigue. Using it at the last moment, Jingwoo completely recovers from his injuries, taking advantage of the spider's surprise. He swiftly attacks his eyes and finally activating his dagger's special effects. With the spider's defense compromised, Jingwoo deals a significant damage and ultimately defeats the spider. After witnessing the intense battle and Jingwoo's incredible strength, Jinho's attitude changes dramatically. He begins to treat Jinho with immense respect and starts treating him like a god, and even volunteers to mine the mana crystals on his behalf. Some time passes before the rest of the hunters return, shocked to find the spider already dead. They assume it was weak and attribute the victory to Jinho's expensive equipment. Learning that Jinho's father is the head of a millionaire corporation, they decide to keep him alive and they man a rescue. However, they first insist that Jinho prove his loyalty by killing Jingwoo. To their surprise, Jinho refuses right away, staying loyal to the man who saved his life. The hunters laugh at this decision, mocking him for his foolishness, but soon declare that if he wishes to die alongside Jingwoo, they will gladly do it. The team's wizard starts to assault with a powerful spell aimed for Jingwoo. The attack lands and the group bursts into laughter, assuming that Jinwoo has been killed. But when the dust settles, Jinwoo has a revelation. He finally understands that this world is ruled by survival of the fittest. At that moment, a system message appeared before him. There are entities nearby trying to kill the player. Eliminate them and ensure your safety. If this quest is not completed, your heart will stop. This revelation hits Jinwoo like a lightning bolt. His previous failures stemmed from hesitation and indecision. This game is a world where you either kill or be killed. With this in mind, Jinwoo rises from the ground unharmed and filled with determination. The hunters are stunned and they mock the wizard, accusing him of holding back. Jinwoo smirks, declaring that if they are hunters, they need to be prepared to be hunted. Jinwoo makes quick work of the squad, taking them down in mere seconds. Only the squad leader remains, the strongest among all of them. The leader confronts Jinwoo, activating his ability and declaring that there are always stronger hunters at every rank. Jinwoo nods but replies with a chilling smile. The two clash in a fierce battle, and despite the leader's strength, Jinwoo emerges victorious. However, before the leader falls, he reveals something cryptic. Apparently, he has a brother, someone far more powerful who will be seeking revenge. With this warning in the air, Jinwoo prepares for the challenges ahead, knowing his journey has just begun. The next day, Jinwoo spends time with his sister enjoying a meal of wings. It's during this relaxation moment that he discovers an unexpected perk of the system: immunity to poison. This revelation comes when he tries to get drunk, only to find out that the system eliminates all the alcohol from his body. Intrigued, he decides to test his immunity further by consuming the poison he obtained from the serpent. To his surprise, gains only the positive effect, such as increased resistance, without suffering the negative consequences like reduced strength. Later that night, Jinwoo receives a call from Jinho, who invites him to dinner. During their conversation, Jinho explains that the reason he became a hunter is due to his father's ambition to establish a guild to support his family's architecture company. The company requires dungeon materials for their construction projects, and owning a guild would save them from having to buy these resources from other guilds. Jinho's father plans for his older brother to lead the guild, but Jinho wants the position for himself. To prove his worth, Jinho must meet two requirements: complete 20 dungeons and pass a supposedly simple exam. However, after this recent harrowing experience, Jinho lost his confidence in entering any other dungeon. To solve this, Jinho makes an offer to our protagonist, which is to help him clear the remaining dungeons, and in return, he will reward the protagonist with the guild's building, valued at an astounding 3 billion wons. Which means that if we were to change this to US dollars, it will give us an equivalent of $2,148,812 with 42 cents. That's a lot of money. Jinwoo initially refuses, but the massive reward quickly changes his mind. He agrees with one condition: they'll enter the dungeon alone without any other hunter. The following morning, Jinwoo resumes his exercise routine, but this time his youngest sister joins him, inspired by his rapid transformation and eager to get in shape. However, the training intensity of our protagonist is far beyond her ability to keep up, and he soon leaves her behind. As he waits for her to catch up, Jinwoo realizes he's capable of exceeding the system's minimum exercise requirements. Motivated, he pushes himself to double the usual workload, and the system rewards his extra effort with something extraordinary: an S-rank dungeon key. Meanwhile, in the United States, a new character enters in the story: Dunsu, an S-rank hunter of Korean origin. Dunsu abandoned Korea for the lucrative opportunity offered by the American Guild Scavengers, where he holds a high rank. Dunsu receives devastating news about his younger brother's death and quickly learns that there are two survivors from the incident: our protagonist and Jinho. Enraged, Dunsu swears vengeance and plans to travel to Korea to eliminate them both. However, due to his obligations with the Scavengers crew, he won't be able to leave the US for another 2 weeks, setting stage for a looming confrontation. As Jinwoo's journey towards power continues, threats from distant lands begin to close in, promising greater challenges ahead. By the way, it's worth mentioning that S-rank hunters are incredibly powerful. There is no way to control them, which is why there are no laws against them, and they can basically do whatever they want. The protagonist decided to test his abilities in an S-rank dungeon, but right at the entrance, he encounters a monster that is too powerful. It's a Cerberus, and just like the spider, none of his attacks are effective. He uses his Wolf Hunter title to increase his strength against beast-type monsters by 40%, and his sprinting ability to boost his speed by 30%, but even so, this isn't enough. Little by little, our protagonist is pushed to the brink, and when he's about to die, he uses a skill that allows him to heal himself. Now he can finally finish off Cerberus by chopping off one of his heads and blinding the other, and easily taking care of the last one. Thanks to that battle, he levels up 4 times, but also realizes that he's still not ready to continue, so he takes his teleportation crystal and leaves to try again later. By the way, do you remember Mr. Kim? Yes, the one who lost an arm. As you know, he's a low-rank hunter, but he's incredibly skilled with the sword. Unfortunately, he awakened as a magician, which renders swordsmanship skills useless in dungeons. But I want to make sure you guys understand that this guy is very good with his sword, to the point that one of his students is an S-rank hunter. I'm telling you all of this because it just happens that Jingu, while searching for a new incursion to make money, runs into all the survivors from that fateful day. Everyone is amazed to see him, since his physique has changed drastically. But not only that, but everyone notices that his leg is also intact. Mr. Song seizes the opportunity to apologize for abandoning him that day and kneels before him to express his gratitude, as it's thanks to Jinwoo that they all survived. Ji is very happy to see him and confesses that she has been looking for him everywhere but never managed to find him. She tells him that he has changed a lot, and a romantic atmosphere begins to form. Setting that aside, the incursion will again be led by Mr. Song, but the only problem is that some criminals will enter with them. I'll explain. When hunters are in prison, they have the option to clear dungeons and reduce their sentence, but they must do it under the supervision of a more powerful hunter belonging to the Hunters Association. So he tells Ji to stay behind him, but she decides to stay right next to him. They enter the dungeon, which is filled with weak goblins, and after they have progressed quite a bit, everyone is amazed that Jingu has not been hurt once. Inside the cave, there are 3 different paths, so they split up. This is when it's revealed that this hunter has been hired to assassinate the prisoners, since you see the criminals that he was guarding had cruelly murdered a family, and the father of the family couldn't bear that they will soon be released, so he paid an incredible amount of money to have them eliminated. The hunter's plan was to kill them slowly so they could suffer and then pretend that they had been killed by a bunch of goblins. But unfortunately for him, the path crossed and he is caught red-handed. But guys, I am going to end the video here. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and like this video. Most importantly, please leave a comment below letting me know if you want a second part, because trust me, what's in the manga, it's mind-blowing. For example, we have ultra-powered ants, we have the protagonist being cooler than ever, a mysterious ultra-cheat character who rumor has it might actually be our protagonist's dad. Just thinking about it, it gets me hyped. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.